the question of identity crisis that each and everyone faces when, I mean, many people from immigrant backgrounds face when they are constantly questioned. And so it is important to find an equilibrium between the two identities that we have. And for me, it was made easy when I started to work with the European Union and the African Union, because it was a way for me, being appointed an expert on peace and security for those two institutions and working with 42 young experts from both continents. It was a way to, you know, make peace with my multiple roots and identities, being myself half Italian and half Moroccan. And so this is something that I want to foster as a consultant and activist, but also a citizen. The fact that we can come from different continents, come up together and work together and promote peace. And then when it comes to being on first hand the target of, you know, being challenged on my views and on my identity and on my ideas. When I was awarded the Young European of the Year in 2019, last year, I was the target of hate by hundreds of people online. And this came literally when I posted it on Twitter, right? And I was also the target of hate from the French far-right leader, Marine Le Pen, that I sued on court. And it really proved how much we need to talk about peace, diversity, and inclusion in Europe. Because the minute that a person like me, born and raised in Europe, is questioned, what does it say in terms of tolerance and respect of the other? But also, if a person like me who holds a European passport is constantly criticized for my identity, imagine what immigrants and refugees face when arriving to Europe. And I cannot speak on their behalf because I can only imagine what they face daily. And one of the values of the European Union is also solidarity. As we promote peace abroad through peace processes, through developing projects, we also have a duty then to apply those values that we promote at home. And for a long time, I have been advocating for peace and security in Europe, recalling that it's not because we don't have an open conflict. I mean, in the majority of European countries, of course, there are still some countries where I would say there is episodes of conflicts and violence. But then there is also, in this peaceful society that we live in, forms of discrimination and hate that produce violence, and they produce also terrorist attacks, as we have seen even recently in France, where I live. So we need to constantly remind of the importance to foster peace and to guarantee that freedom and diversity and equality are guaranteed and are valued. So now, when we face that much stigma, the question that comes to my mind is, how do we turn this stigma into a strength? And how do we make sure that diversity, which is also part of the motto of the European Union, united in diversity, how do we make sure that diversity is seen as normal and not seen as an exception? Because also what we tend to do often when we promote some political figures or some minorities on media, we tend to do an exceptionalism as the first Black woman doing something, the first brown woman being at the head of a company. We need to normalize this, right? And to make sure that we have an intersectional approach where each and every citizen can be seen just as equal. So by understanding, listening, and hearing from the stories of other citizens, especially minorities, we will just do the first step of understanding these struggles and the challenges that they face, but also the huge potential and the added value that they bring to society. And this is our goal at We Belong, which is a podcast and platform that I co-founded with Jana de Groot from Luxembourg and Soumeya Saiboub from Italy. This podcast that shares and amplifies the voice of the new daughters of Europe, how we call them, which means the immigrant daughters of Europe, born and raised in Europe, but having extra-European roots. So what does it mean for them to be European? But also, what do they do in society? There is journalists, MEP that we interviewed, there is politicians, entrepreneurs. We want to make sure that we promote more positive narratives around migration and immigrant descents, especially, but also that we remind society at large of their presence and their importance in the countries they live in. So we have interviewed women in Belgium, in France, in Italy, in Spain, in the Netherlands, and our goal is also to provide role models for the new generations and remind them that they can also succeed in their life, in their career, and in their passions and aspirations. So finally, because we're talking about Europe at school, I would like to stress the importance to bring Europe to the local level and especially to minorities. And when we talk about minorities, we don't only talk about ethnic or religious minority, but also gender minorities, people who are non-binary, and people who face unique struggles that might not allow them to be politicized or becoming, engaged into politics. And so it is important that we make people understand, both young people but also older people, of what does it mean to live in Europe and to speak multiple languages, but also to travel across Europe with all this freedom of movement and the whole benefits that we have from Europe, but also the challenges that we face. The current COVID-19 crisis that was, that shaped our union and the world, but the way that Europeans are responding is completely different from, for example, the UK, where Brexit is happening, or, for example, the US. So what does it mean for us to promote solidarity and being European? So finally, I would stress the importance to promote Erasmus programs and make them accessible also to immigrant descents. Of course, every person can apply to an Erasmus program, right? But when you lack this important information, because you don't speak English or because you don't even know what the European Union is, and I have seen many young people who are very far from this reality. So how do we make sure that we bridge this gap? This is the challenge they pose to the young European federalists, but also to all of us, to remind that Europe is our project, and we need to work together in order to make sure that every person that wants to undermine this project, whether they are Eurosceptics or whether they are hateful people promoting openly division and exclusion, we need to remember that this is our duties as a duty as younger generations to foster this equal and fair society. So this is it for me. And then, I would love to discuss with all of you. This is an open discussion, and feel free to ask me any question if you have. But also, if you have any reaction on this need to bring Europe to the local level, feel free to Yeah, speak.
Well, now people participant, you should be able to switch on your microphone and your video. If you want to ask any question, just well, you can write down your question in the chat box or whatever. Raise your hand, take say I want to ask something or whatsoever. Up to you. Okay, so thank you so much for your presentation and what you are actually doing at your level with We Belong Europe in order to give the voice to young women, as you say, and for presenting what are the main issues actually for um, not young migrants and young refugees, as you say, but young European with migrant background, as you say. So my first question will be: you say that it's the main point with, sorry, the main point with the European Union, it's more or less the lack of access and the lack of information from the European level to the local level, and
Mhm.
what can be like, for example, for a participant at the local level wouldn't have who doesn't have like the opportunity like you to speak or to be well known or to be awarded of a European prize. How can he do in his daily life to make the local level, the European level more present at the local level?
How do I make, or how do?
Yeah, what will be your tips, your
Mm-hmm.
advices for
Yeah.
a young person who want to be engaged in the European sector and like he wants to, share
Mhm.
information and so on? What would be your tips about that? Because you mentioned it before, but how can someone can actually do things?
Yeah. So first of all, I would like to remind that at 16 years old, I was just young woman, voiceless, living in France and working in underprivileged neighborhoods as a volunteer. And I also didn't know how to, bridge this gap and how to me arrive to work at the European level or with the European Commission and European institutions. So it has to start somewhere. And it doesn't mean because I made it and also that I was awarded a prize that other people can't do it. So my first tip is the minute that you open a door and gain a seat at the table, we have a duty to um, keep this door open, but also make other people enter. And so providing opportunities. And that's what I try to do also through We Belong, where we share concrete keys on every episode. At the end of every episode, we have a key, an opportunity, a program that we share with young people so they can apply. And then what I can say more concretely, it is to start to be engaged with an organization. It can be a small NGO in your neighborhood. It can be an online project. There are many opportunities, and then being vocal on what matters for us. That's how I started to do through an advocacy work. And then when you will be ready, you will be able to organize and gather other people around your idea. But then there is, I think there is a more important question before this one, which is like there is some people they want to do politics and to be engaged, and so they just need a guideline or some advice on how to do it. But then there is many people who don't even know they can do it. They're like, oh, this is something very high for me and I can't, I'm not entitled to do this. And so we need to work on this imposter syndrome that young people have, but especially young women, and especially young women from underprivileged and immigrant backgrounds. And so my part, my small share on this is that I, on a regular basis, meet and spend time with these young people. As soon as I have opportunities, I share them on Instagram with my online community, and I try to make sure that it is not only useful for young people, but especially young people from underprivileged backgrounds. For example, lately there is this mobile film festival that they have been promoting. It's a festival organized all across the world, but it's a festival where people can send a 1-minute video, and I shared this information, and then one of my mentees that I'm very close with, who lives in a very underprivileged background neighborhood in France, he did this video and he applied, and he is 15 years old. And for me, this is already a huge success to see that they are trying, that they believe in themselves. Fostering this little, hope on them, it's already huge. If you make them understand that they can try and they can at least, have confidence that they can achieve stuff, it's already a success.
Okay, so really the main thing is really to try, even though you don't know what will be the result at the end. I do understand, but then I will have a more specific question regarding, well, unfortunately, the current situation and what you mentioned at the beginning. It's related to hate speech. Hello, Pete. Maybe you want to speak, to ask a question. Pete, do you hear me, Pete?
Yeah, just finish your sentence.
Okay, first. Perfect. So you mentioned Marine Le Pen and you saw her and you won, but we see more. No?
It's still on process. We didn't have
It's still on process. Okay.
We didn't
Well,
have
anyway.
yet, yeah.
Okay. But I hope you will win, because anyway. So you were mentioning hate speech, and you see now people who are taking the voice, especially on social network and so on, they do face hate speech from different kind of people, and especially from the from the extremists and so on. So what you would be your, because young people, for example, at their level, they want to foster a more inclusive Europe, more inclusive society and so on, and to give the voice to other young people, especially young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, but they do face sometimes hate speech on social network or on internet.
Yeah.
How do you, it's a bit naive, but my question would be, how do you manage? What do you do against hate speech on social network?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is an important question, because many people would face this and then it would completely discourage them, right? So it is important, first of all, to seek support and do not feel alone because you're behind a screen and feeling that, this is happening and you're powerless. Also, I have been very vocal in asking some social media to take responsibility to protect citizens. I have been also working with some institutions about this, and it's important that we have the right tools to protect our citizens. But then, when we, as a young activist or any activist that tweets, for example, on Twitter, there is many trolls and there is many hate speech. And it's very common to just have, a bunch of people coming to you and, just commenting and criticizing you, or sometimes even threatening you. First of all, we need to remember that people who do this, sometimes they're very well organized, unfortunately. So sometimes it's just one person who sees this post, they don't like it, and then they be like, oh, okay, let's go all 10, 20 people and tweet under this tweet. So what I do is that I block them. I learned to block them and to make sure that they don't damage my mental health, which is the priority. And so for every young person, the first thing is your mental health. If you see that this is taking too much of your energy and of your time, privilege and prioritize on your health. Secondly, for example, when I was the target of hate speech online, the first thing I did, because I was very, mediatized, then I had these invitations to go on TV. I refused to go on TV and give credits to a person that was a political candidate for the European elections who would have gained thousands of votes. So I didn't go on TV, and also I didn't want to nourish this hate. And I took a legal step instead. So I would advise people to be like very strategic on how you react. You can be, vocal on media, but maybe this could not be the right solution for that moment. And for me, it was better to take a legal step. So seek legal support. There is many platforms supporting. For me, I just took a lawyer, but then I discovered later, like even up till now, I'm discovering that there are so many tools to guarantee our protection. And then finally, never stop speaking up. Continue to speak up and continue to raise your voice. That matters. And don't be afraid to, defend your values if you believe they are important and that they are valid.
Okay, thanks for your answer. Maybe at some point at the end, if you can share or send me some link for the platform you mentioned, it would be very nice because, for example, I don't know them, so maybe we can communicate them to other people. So, Pete, I think you do have a question. Go ahead.
Sorry. I just pressed the button and it popped out of the window, but indeed, I wanted to make an intervention. I was in France on Friday, and I opened the TV and I saw what happened with the professor, with the teacher, and I was positively, let's say, no matter the situation, that I saw during the Saturday morning, people of different religions going to the school and deposing, putting down flowers at the entrance of the school, the demonstrations down. But what I'm really, really afraid, as the topic we're covering is to some extent related to it, is how authorities are taking advantage of the situation to say that we have to deport 200 people, that they were illegal in the country. And I was like, the first thought I had as a youth worker, as a person, is like, why is it important to mention that now, when instead of focusing on unity and what happened in connection to freedom of speech and intimidation of an extreme person, of a network of extreme people, there were 15 people arrested, that you need to mention that specifically, and the connotations you're creating and the momentum you're creating, while I really like the message of Macron. Like, it was not a typical message that you get to hear most of the time about Muslims. It was Islamists, which I think is a term that we, even Muslims, understand that it has to do with the extreme expression of the religion, like Christians. I might be wrong, but I found it more neutral comparing to previous statements when these things happen towards the Muslim community, which are very disturbing, I have to say. And on the other part, now at the specific moment with the elections done and seeing like the extreme right being in front and gaining ground, how do you see this case being properly reflected from us and being tackled now that it's still warm? Because what I've noticed a lot is that a lot of things happen religious wise or extreme wise, and we choose as youth workers or young people to back off, not to add oil on fire. But long term, it works bad because we don't clarify that this person does not represent a whole religion. This person doesn't represent all refugees or all migrants, as is often portrayed. Yet our decisions many times tend to add oil, let's say, add to the fire of racism and extremism on both sides, on religious or nationalism. How would you advise us to react? Because I think a lot of times inaction and silence doesn't help the situation, but makes it much worse. And that's what I'm seeing right now with the media and the communication from the government. Indeed, Prime Minister was quite helpful and nice to be present in the demonstrations. But yet, as a person, as a young person, I'm not satisfied from the messages he portrays with this communication of we're sending people back or we arrested people that they have done, as you said, also the online bullying. This should have been done much earlier if they've seen this, not now. It was a long package, but I think you get a lot of points out of here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for bringing this important point, indeed. And all I can say is that it's a tough time to be a minority in France. I was 20 kilometers from the place where the terrorist attack occurred the other day, and I was in a conference for justice, 3 days conference, where hundreds of entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs were gathered to talk about justice. And as we talk about justice, we see so much, struggles and misunderstandings and injustice going on. What I can say is that no matter what, we should stand all together against terrorism, against hate, and against violence. And this is something that gathered people in the street yesterday, right? It was this demonstration, this peaceful demonstration for peace. But then the political response, I really don't agree with what is going on. I'm very, very, very scared and very angry on the way the government is instrumentalizing this terrorist attack to promote, hate. And I say this because in the last few days, but also the last few weeks, we have seen minorities being used as scapegoats to promote a separatist law that will tackle Muslim people and Muslim minorities. I speak here as a secular person. I'm not, in my engagement, I never talk about my personal beliefs, and I would like to make it clear. So I will not enter in a discussion on what it means to be a Muslim or not, but I can just say that to be a visible minority, how I am, there are many people that face hate, both offline and online. And in a government that, in Europe, France is the country with the worst case situation for COVID. So the government, since a year and more than a year, was already damaged and undermined by the yellow vests, by movements, social movements, and now the crisis. The way they are managing it is a disastrous way. And so, I am seeing an instrumentalization of this tragic episode for their political agenda. And so when you ask me about how to counter far right, I'm asking myself, is it this government, isn't it already promoting far right measures? And the answer is, for me, yes, they are. So that's what I'm more scared about, because at least, a far right party is openly calling for hate, is openly, promoting this idea that being a migrant, you don't belong to Europe. And but with Macron and with his government, we're seeing the same narrative being fostered. And by the way, on Twitter, you can read people asking for the abolishment of the asylum status. There is this whole idea that being a migrant means being a terrorist. So of course, there is a misunderstanding. There is a lot of shock. And I'm also shocked on what happened. Is really a shocking attack that we all faced. But we can't promote unity, and that's, the government is calling for unity while also dividing us. So we need to remember that we need to stay together with it. But thank you so much for your response.
But so then you are talking more about the French case because due to the current situation and what happened a few days ago. But then my question will be more oriented to the EU. So do you think that the EU can actually go against what you say? What will be, my question will be, what will be the role of the EU and especially the EU institution in what you were talking about?
Okay. Yes, sorry. When you talk about France, I'm just thinking France. It's very difficult for me to remain, solid in these times. It's a very tough time. But then what can the European Union do,
Yeah,
right?
actually, yeah. That the question, because we know that. Sorry to interrupt you. It's not, but the thing is, like, we know that there are more and more, um, well, extremist parties and so on in different European countries. So, don't you think that the EU can actually have a bigger role in order to fight against
Mm-hmm.
extremism or
Mm-hmm.
hate speech and so on? What do you think about that?
Definitely, definitely. I think it is the role of the EU to promote peace. But then, can we remain a democracy while having in Europe dictatorships? And I'm saying this strong word because we have seen during COVID-19 countries like Hungary promoting or using this crisis to foster authoritarian measures. Poland also, we have seen LGBTQ plus rights and also women's rights being undermined and being challenged and questioned. So, I think that the role of the EU is far more than just condemning this. We need to sanction these countries, and also when it comes to minorities in France, for example. But then we have already a unity being very fragile, right? People calling for Brexit, Frexit, Italexit. We have also MEPs who are anti-European. So do they have a place in the European Parliament if they don't want to be in Europe? This is also a question that we need to ask ourselves. We are still a democracy, but still we have people who are in the European Union and in the European Parliament and have a seat to say that they want to leave. So if you want to leave, why do you come to the European Parliament? So it's a tough time to be European, but it's important that the European Union stands strong and fosters and guarantees that our rights are recognized, because otherwise our values, will remain just a beautiful utopia and an ideal without being concretely implemented.
Yeah. So then I do see what you mean. I 100% agree with what you're saying. But then now we are talking at a bigger level at the with like with the example of the European institution and so on. But the question will be like, for example, do you think that individually with the tools we have, for example, and European civic education or civic education and so on, we can do and act at our level. You know what I mean? Like, do
Yes.
you think that someone who is a volunteer in the youth association, for example, talking or raising awareness about the young migrants or like the difficulty that some European disadvantaged groups can face in their daily life, do you
Mhm.
think that people and young people should be more engaged to promote more inclusive Europe and so on? Of course, you will say yes, but I would like to know a bit deeper than just a yes, you know?
For me, the approach that I promoted, that I apply to my work, is first of all, try to change things from within, right? And then if you don't, then you call people out. So what I try to do is working with institutions, but then there are many range of options that we have to take action. There is online campaigning. There is peaceful demonstrations. There is so many tools that we have as young people, and we have seen with Fridays for the Future, but also with the Me Too movement, we have seen the power of civil society to shake the narratives, but also to prioritize our points and our goals in the media and political agenda. Of course, it is a challenge when you're young and when you maybe lack from meaningful resources and tools, but then you still have a huge power, which is number. We are the largest population of young people that have, never ever lived on Earth, and so we are a lot of people, of young people. So gathering around an idea and now around a project and then also spreading information, as I said at the beginning. You're talking about civic education. We need to make sure that we touch each and every young person, also the most marginalized ones. And then I would say, organize around this idea, because an idea stays an idea if you don't put it into action or into reality. So at least you need to try, and to try just needs one step. And then, of course, it's a long process, but that one step is so essential, because it's the motor for then a domino effect that we'll have on society. So I really stress the importance to gather people around this one idea, and then together share the roles and take action, whether it is online campaigning, whether it is dissemination of knowledge among young people, even in your school, in your neighborhood, in your house, with your family. Change starts with each and every single of us.
Thanks for your answer, and you went a bit deeper in sharing information and so on. So that's cool. I don't know if anyone has a question or want to talk about a specific topic. No. Maybe don't be shy. It's okay. But then I will ask you maybe one last question. And so you were talking about online hate speech and so on, but what do you do? And you are also mentioning hate speech in your daily life, like physically and so on. How do you, I mean, how are you supposed to react when you do face hate speech physically? Like, I mean, I don't know, because like, for example, online it can be a bit easier because you switch off your your phone or your laptop and so on. But the thing is, like, we know and we saw this weekend is going to be a bit political because of what happened this weekend, but we saw during the protest in France that some people were facing during the peaceful protests some insults, some negative comments, that they were going out for with various names and so on. But the thing is, like, what can you do when you are trying to promote a more inclusive speech, or like a peaceful speech physically with different people, but you do encounter someone who is like completely the opposite of, and completely like negative, not necessarily insult, but like someone who has negative opinion. Like I will take the example of a young volunteer that will do an intervention in school, and you're talking about inclusion with young migrants and young refugees, and when you, for example, face a young people who is like completely against, do you have like, how can you react? Because at first you will be a bit shocked because it's like young people, and maybe he's like using the terms he's hearing in different area, but how can you make him change his mind? You know what I mean? What kind of tools like,
Yeah,
what can you do actually?
I see what you mean. So I think it depends on which context this happens. If you are in a school and you just confront your ideas with another person, and then, or in class, and you realize that actually half of the class or another person has another view. It happened to me many times, especially studying in an elite university where I was a minority. And actually, what I would advise is to listen to what others have to say and try to debate respectfully. But then if you see that this escalates, I mean, you can't force your opinion on others. The beauty of society is that we all are different and unique, and we should be respected for our views. Then we have also to be open-minded enough to understand that we can't all think the same. But of course, it is important, and that's what I try to do, to remind ourselves that there is much misinformation and ignorance on certain topics. And so when you face something, for example, when you face on first hand what it means to live in a underprivileged neighborhood and face discrimination and live as an immigrant daughter, and when a person comes to you and brings just a scientific argument, being like, oh yeah, I read this, and so this article says the opposite of what you lived, so I'm right. How can you explain, remaining rational enough, and without bringing or your lived experience and your emotions, that your views and your ideas are valid? And this is why it is important to recognize, understand, listen, but also acknowledge the unique stories that others have to share. I think this is essential. I see that some people have reaction. Maybe they can just speak about them. I don't know.
Pete, maybe.
Hello. I tend to like to talk, so I'll use the time. No. I have an example not so related with refugees, but on the online frame of addressing misinformation or people's views when they're quite to the extreme. I work a lot on gender, and once I saw some guys posting like about the New Zealand Prime Minister, and they were like, okay, this is why they should focus on skills and not women in politics. It doesn't matter about her gender. And the comments below were not related to this comment that the person did, but more like, yeah, and it should be about not about equal opportunities, but equal access and blah blah blah. And I was like, okay, guys, wait a second. You realize that the issue here is role models. There are no female role models out there, first of all, for young women or young girls to look at. Forget the system of the countries, forget equal opportunities, forget everything. So we're talking about they're focusing on the fact that she's a woman to put out the role model argument. And they were like, what are you talking about? And women have opportunities. And then a person started using references. A clear recommendation I have is, if you don't know about what you're being asked to or being, let's say, facing in a conversation, don't start building on arguments or things you've heard, because easily they can do the same and it can escalate in a totally wrong direction, which instead of engaging in a dialogue, you build up their assumptions or points of views into the opposite direction. Second part, I was using, like, he was really the person was really referring to the US case that US has equal opportunities and has this and that. And I was like, okay, you want, and he gave me the example of the press release person of Trump, which is a woman. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take a bipartisan and Republican survey. Here are the data. And they're actually saying, the Republican politicians, that this is a reality. And through an engagement and really keeping it cool, as in the end, the comment was, the person said, like, look, I've never had the experience of listening from a woman this, but your argumentation and your data you used really helped me to question my idea, and I will look forward to it. The final result, what I wanted to say is, like, really, if you want to go deeper on a conversation, feel comfortable to acknowledge that you might be wrong. Because we do have this strong position of showing the other that we're right. That does not help a conversation. Second, be open to listen, because what they have to say might be helpful in general. So you need to be, in a way, skeptic about what you're listening, knowing that it might be extreme or risky or anything. But there is, a vision or an understanding within that person's story of why do they see this or why do they say this. Maybe they had a negative experience themselves, but they have clustered their idea on that negative experience, which we all do at the end of the day. And I think it's really important to find somebody that knows better and engage them into the conversation or refer the person to them instead of taking the responsibility yourself to say that, no, I can change your idea and I can, I don't believe you're right, therefore I'm going to prove you wrong. Because that's where the real clash happens, not on the idea itself, but on proving each other wrong or right. And I think that's the most important. No matter the age or the concept, it's really important that it's constructive and you understand that there is space. And I'm shutting up right now.
No, thank you so much. I think it's very important. And you say everything. You said it perfectly. Like, we need to understand that we might not, be experts on a topic, and so it is important to give space also for doubt, for other views, and respecting that, each and every one of us might have these views because they face, for example, a person might be racist because he faced racist by another person, or because they faced an episode where a person of color was having an interaction with them, and so because of that they might become racist. Like, I have my just to give you an example, I have one of my family a long distance relative in Sicily. The first time she saw me, she told me, "What is it, this thing in your head? I don't like it, take it off, because the people who wear it, they are terrorists." And so that's, she lives in the middle of nowhere in Sicily, and that's what she hears in TV. That she told me, "Yeah, I saw it on TV." And so how can you explain to these people that actually you can be who you are and wear what you want without being questioned? This is super important, right? Because there is much misunderstanding. There is much, perspectives, just singular perspective that we have that can be questioned, and we need to question them, right? But thank you so much for your contribution.
No, yeah, you're right. So I have, talking about the perspective, I do have a question, and it will be the last one, which is from Magali. And actually, she said that in JEF Germany, they started diversity and empowerment groups. And she is asking, what will you do to make this group more, okay, how can I say, what is it? That it doesn't just stay, in our bubble, but we can actually really and concretely engage with more young people in order to be more inclusive.
Thank you so much for this question. And I'm very happy that at the Young European Federalists, you are taking these steps to encourage diversity. Diversity is such a broad question. It's also related to gender diversity, age diversity, but also race diversity, and and much more. Disability. What does it mean to be, a person with disabilities? So I would say, don't hesitate, first of all, to get in touch with We Belong, as we have been advising many people on those topics, but also more concretely, I know that this Schwarzkopf Foundation that awarded me the Young European of the Year, they are from Berlin, based in Berlin, and they work also on diversity. They have many programs with immigrant sons and daughters and people with immigrant backgrounds that could possibly be interested in joining your network. And then don't hesitate to get in touch with local NGOs. I have been mentoring a young woman from Germany. She is Eritrean, and she's 19. She is working on so many initiatives there in Germany. And first of all, I think that, it is so important to mentor people who are from minorities background, but also to give them concrete tools. And don't hesitate to reach out to them, to go on schools, to meet young people, and to identify, people by also just in spreading disinformation and reaching out to them directly. But I'm also happy to help you with this process, so don't hesitate to contact me for this.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think it's gonna be the last sentence of the webinar. Actually, you are right. In order to be more inclusive, you do have to ask other association in order to collaborate with them and to learn, because it's a win-win approach and everyone is learning actually. So thank you everyone. Thank you so much, Yasmine, for making yourself available. I know that you have a lot to do and you're very busy, so it was really a pleasure. I think most of the participants will share my view, and well, we keep in touch, and I wish you a very good evening, and that's it.
Thank you
It was
so
very
much.
informative.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank
Pete,
you.
for your information, and thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure, Pete. I was so glad to debate and discuss with you. And feel free to follow We Belong, to listen to our podcast and share it. And especially if you need advice or if you want to discuss all these more, don't hesitate to follow me and We Belong. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
And perfect.